Hello, my name is Emily Underwood. I work in community engagement at the Missouri Historical Society. On behalf of MHS, I want to welcome you to STL History Live. Thank you for joining us virtually today. We do have ASL interpretation available today, so if you'd like to follow along with our interpreters, please be sure to set your screen to gallery view so you can make sure you see that. Thank you again for joining us for our Women's History Month kickoff program, continuing the legacy of empowering Missouri women. This is the first of a number of programs celebrating the women of Missouri. We have programs for kids, we have a teacher workshop, homeschool activities, and of course, other general public programs. So please be sure to check those out. I'll go ahead and post a link in just a little bit to the full lineup. I'll post that in the chat, but you can also find it on the Missouri History Museum Facebook page and also on our website, which is mohistory.org. Safety is a top priority, so all of our programming remains virtual right now, but the museum is open. We're open Wednesday through Sunday. We have several safety precautions in place, so we would love for you to visit if you feel safe doing that. Advanced reservations are required to visit both the Missouri History Museum and Soldiers Memorial Military Museum. You can visit mohistory.org to plan your visit, reserve your free tickets. Our Library and Research Center is currently closed, but we do have remote research assistance available. You can access that by emailing library@mohistory.org, or you can fill out a research request form at mohistory.org. Today's program is presented in conjunction with the exhibit Beyond the Ballot, St. Louis and Suffrage, presented by Wells Fargo. So I want to make sure to thank them for their support, as well as our education sponsor, Emerson. I know that some of you watching are Missouri Historical Society members, so I also want to be sure to thank you. We are so grateful for your support. And if you're not a member, we would still love for you to consider joining us today. You can find more about our membership program at mohistory.org/support. And we also sincerely thank all of the residents of St. Louis City and County for your tax contributions through the Zoo Museum Tax District. Just a couple more quick things before we get started. Our STL History Live series runs twice a week. It's on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Also, we have Soldiers Memorial Chow and Chat programs. Those are monthly. They're always on a Wednesday at noon. You can visit the events calendar at mohistory.org or again, the Missouri History Museum Facebook page to get all of those programs. And if you can't make it to a program, or if you want to go rewatch or share it with friends and family, you can find almost all of our programs on our Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube right now rewatching this, please give us a thumbs up and give us a like. If you're watching it live, we would love to get some feedback from you as well. So you'll notice that a survey at some point during this program will open up in a separate tab. And we would really appreciate it if you would give us your feedback and take a moment to fill out that survey and let us know what you thought about the program today. Okay, let us get to it. We're going to start the program with just a little bit of historical context for this discussion. So to do that, I am going to turn the screen over. I'm going to stop my share right now. Actually, no, I'm going to share one more thing with you before I do that, but I'll turn the screen over in just a moment to our exhibitions manager, Katie Moon. Katie was the content lead on the Beyond the Ballot exhibit, and she also authored, this is what I wanted to share with you, this wonderful companion book called Groundbreakers, Rule Breakers, and Rebels, 50 Unstoppable St. Louis Women, illustrated by Rory, which spotlights 50 change-making women from St. Louis. Of course, it's available for purchase in our shop and also online. I'll make sure to post a link for that. But right now, I am gonna stop my share and go ahead and turn the screen over to Katie. Thanks, Katie.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is my pleasure to be with you this morning and to also be able to hear from these incredible women in the next few minutes. So like Emily said, I was the content developer for the Beyond the Ballot exhibit that is open now at the Missouri History Museum. And these women that are speaking today come from such a legacy of women in St. Louis. And wanted to just share with you a little bit about that history and invite you to come in and see the exhibit and read the book if you are interested in learning more about that. The first charitable organization in St. Louis was founded by a group of women in 1824. So here we are 200 years later, and women are still helping our community and doing amazing things. And then there's women like Annie Malone, who many of you are probably familiar with, at least her name, but who came to St. Louis with a dream and an idea, and had created a hair care product for African American women and started selling it door to door with a few other ladies that she knew. And in a few short years was employing over 75,000 women across the country. But she didn't just take her wealth and hide it away. She actually donated so much of that money to the community to help the community, built a community center at the center of the African American community in St. Louis, and began the children's home and led that for a long time. So these women who are talking today are a continued legacy of women helping women in St. Louis. And I'm so excited that this history that we have is continuing, and we're still doing amazing work and still writing history today. But if you want to know more about women like Annie Malone, about charitable organizations, other women who have done amazing things in St. Louis, please feel free to come by the museum and see Beyond the Ballot. It's open through this year. It's completely free. We just ask you to make we ask you to register online, but we'd love to have you come in and learn a little bit about the history behind the work that these women are doing. So with that, I know you're here to see, not me, but you're here to hear from these women. So I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, and she can get you started with the main program. So thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much, Katie. Really appreciate that. And as Katie said, we're going to take this idea of women empowering other women, and we're going to take it out of the historic and bring it up to the present day with this panel of three incredible women who are doing just that. So I'm going to introduce them to you now. Our first panelist is Wendy Doyle. She's the president and CEO of United We. Wendy advances all women's economic and civic leadership using evidence-based research and policy solutions to make meaningful change. Her nonprofit career began as a National Major Gifts Officer with the National Kidney Foundation, Inc., and she worked as a nonprofit consultant who focused on board development and strategic planning. She later served as the Executive Vice President of Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas. She earned her BA from Rockhurst University in Kansas City, and she serves Kansas City, Missouri, and she serves on the Missouri Women's Health Council, the Missouri Foundation for Health's Missouri Opportunity Incubator, a Junior League of Kansas City, Missouri's C3KC advisor, the University of Missouri Kansas City Star Education Committee, Park University Civic Advisory Council, and the Launch Code Kansas City Advisory Board. So thank you, Wendy, for being here today. Next up is Leslie Gill, president of Rung for Women. Having served in leadership capacities for several profit and nonprofit organizations, Leslie has been deeply involved in a wide range of social welfare issues. Before joining Rung for Women as the organization's president, she served as the chief executive officer of Annie Malone Children's and Family Service Center. Leslie has also served as executive director of College Summit. And prior to that, she spent 6 years in executive leadership roles with the Girl Scouts in St. Louis and Atlanta, where she oversaw all kinds of things, advocacy and governmental affairs, but I think probably most importantly, cookie sales, right? Leslie is a native of St. Louis. She's a distinguished alumnus of Hampton University and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Hampton, as well as a Master's of International Business from St. Louis University. Thank you so much, Leslie, for being here. And our final panelist today is Carrie Kohler, MSW, Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Greater St. Louis. Carrie began as executive director in August 2020. She has over 12 years of nonprofit experience with extensive leadership background in program development, evaluation, community building, and partnership building. She spent the last 7 years working to advocate for women's health, including as the director of program and evaluation for Gateway to Hope. She worked in Washington University in St. Louis in various roles in public health and research, and served as senior director of undergraduate admissions. Kohler received her Master's of Social Work from Washington University and her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Arkansas. And last but not least, I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful moderator who is going to steer today's conversation. Andrea Henderson covers race, identity, and culture for St. Louis Public Radio. Before that, she assisted with the production of NPR's podcast Code Switch and produced pieces for the weekend edition of All Things Considered. Andrea's passion for storytelling began at a weekly newspaper in her hometown of Houston, Texas. And most recently, Andrea won a 2020 Regional Edward R. Murrow Award for her contributions to St. Louis Public Radio's news series, Children Under Fire. You can find her on Twitter at her handle at DREB Journalist, and you can find her today right here. So Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you. The screen is yours. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Emily, for those introductions, and thanks to Lindsay and everyone at the Missouri Historical Society for having me today. I know these extraordinary women that we have here stand on the shoulders of other great St. Louis women and Missouri women who have pushed for women's rights beyond the ballot. Now, I do have a few questions to ask, and it's not going to be about me. It's going to be about you women today, and I'll ask specific questions first, and then we can pass it on to whoever wants to jump in. And for the viewers, make sure you go to the chat room and type out your questions so that we can get those answered during the Q&A portion of our conversation. Welcome again to everyone who is logged on to watch and listen to groundbreaking Missouri women talk about the challenges that women are facing in our state and how they are supporting women during this time. So first, we're going to start off with something fun. I know we kind of talked about it before, but I want you all to tell the audience today about a woman in Missouri that inspires you the most and why. And I will start with you, Wendy.
Thank you, Andrea, and it's good to be with you as well as with Leslie and Carrie. And a woman who inspires me in Missouri is one that was just inducted into the Missouri Hall of Fame. And there's a bronze bust now available in the state capitol in Jefferson City. And it's Annie White Baxter. And Annie White Baxter was the very first county clerk in the United States. And it was in our own backyard here in Missouri, in Jasper County in Carthage, Missouri, back in the late 1800s. And Annie oversaw the very elections that she couldn't even vote in. And the bust was inducted into the Hall of Fame for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And it's someone that I deeply admire for all that she accomplished. And you think about the obstacles that she overcame to win an election in the late 1800s, let alone to become the first county clerk in the United States. So my choice is Annie White Baxter.
That's a beautiful choice. I've never heard of her, but I will definitely take a look into her and her story. What about you, Carrie?
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you all today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Just another plug for Katie's book. I really enjoyed the exhibit and getting a chance to read through some individuals that we might not be as familiar with. And one person that stood out for me is Rose Church. She was the first nurse in the aerospace program. I'm a big space program enthusiast. My first job in high school was as a camp counselor at a aerospace and flight camp. So I grew up loving the space program. So to hear about a woman in St. Louis who was instrumental in the space program early on was incredible. We hear a lot about the men, of course, in the program. So to hear about this woman who fought for her job, by the way, it wasn't a position that they were looking to hire. So she fought for her role and she helped care for some of our first astronauts in the space program. She was also one of the first people to respond to a flight accident that happened at Lambert back in 1966. And actually I was talking with my husband who works at Boeing now, and they were saying it was the 55th anniversary of that accident just this past Sunday. And so she was one of the first respondents to that flight accident. So that's definitely my choice. Definitely look her up, read into it, and get Katie's book for more information. So thanks again for having me today.
Thank you for that, Carrie. Leslie?
Yeah, so again, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited for this conversation. I have to admit, there are lots of St. Louis women in history who I really admire, but having been the past CEO of Annie Malone Children and Family Services, I'm gonna have to go with Annie Malone. I admire her so much, her business acumen, her entrepreneurial spirit, and most importantly, her philanthropy and her love for kids. And so, in a community that needed a place for children to go who had been abandoned and neglected, to have the foresight to create this space that would be safe and loving for kids. And now, more than 100 years later, 130 plus years later, the institution is still alive and well. It's just such a great testament to Annie Malone and her generous spirit and her amazing business acumen.
Yes, I've done a few stories about Annie Malone, and her story is very amazing. And I'll stick with you, Leslie. I know with Rung for Women, your organization creates a space to set up women for success. What are some critical components that you believe women need in order to further their success?
Wow, that's a great question, Andrea. I would say intrinsic motivation is a quality that we look for in our members. Really, women who've had that aha moment in life and are ready to really focus on investing in themselves and elevating their lives, changing the trajectory for themselves and their families. So I would say intrinsic motivation is something that I think we all innately have, but it sometimes needs to be fostered, and sometimes you need a community to help you see and thrive in potential. And so that is really what Rung for Women will do for our members, is surround them with a community of like-minded women who will help them achieve their personal and professional goals.
We definitely need that. Carrie, did you want to add anything to that? Any other components that you feel can push women towards success?
Yeah, definitely. I will echo everything Leslie just said. I also, I think the value of having a community and support structure around you is so key. And that's, one of the things that we focus here at the Women's Foundation is working with our local employers and ensuring that they create those opportunity rich environments for women. So whether it's through, their hiring practices or leadership and retention programs, I think a lot of it comes internally from women, but also externally in the environments around them from employers, policymakers, and so forth. So that's, the things we focus on here at the Women's Foundation is addressing any sort of barriers that women may face towards economic success and creating opportunities for them whenever possible.
And speaking on barriers, what are some of those barriers that women seem to face when it comes to economic independence?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the pandemic has really elevated those barriers. We're starting to hear that conversation around, paid leave, childcare access. These are issues that were there prior to the pandemic, certainly, but now have, surfaced and are certainly getting the attention that it definitely needs. So I think, for a lot of these women right now struggling, maintaining that balance between work life, family life, caring for children when daycares and schools have closed, gone virtual. I mean, it's created, this incredible struggle between the two, right? And so I think it's raised the conversation, certainly. So I'm excited to continue that, but I think it's also created a lot of hardship for women. And then of course, leave policies definitely have been a big struggle for women. We're, the only developed country in the world that doesn't have paid leave policies for women all across our country. So it's been a big struggle for women always, but definitely a bigger struggle now during the pandemic as, again, women are caring for children when schools close. You never know when you're going to get that email about a school closure. I know I am constantly looking for those emails. So I think that's, something that again has been elevated, and hopefully we can seek the policy changes both with employers, but also with policymakers at the state and local level to address these, solutions to these barriers that women are facing.
Right. I hear a lot of women talking about, childcare, and I saw recently a story that stated that it was a survey out there that nearly 20,000 childcare centers were closed because of the pandemic, and I'm sure that is, hitting families pretty hard, especially if you have women that are working from home, as well as those who are essential workers. They need those childcare centers available. What is the Women's Foundation doing to try to help support women during the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we work on is our Women in the Workplace Employment Scorecard. We issued our fourth survey just this past fall. And so really it's about working with the employers and elevating and promoting the best policies and practices that support women. And that includes issues around childcare resources. So what are employers doing out there to support women and working families during this time? And how can we promote those so that employers can learn from one another, right? So let's honor those employers who are leading the way so that other employers can start to implement those policies. I just, in the last month or so, saw an article in the Business Journal about how employers are starting to see that childcare resources are becoming just as important as healthcare, right? So that in order to retain this incredible talent, employers need to start addressing this issue. So whether that means helping provide stipends for childcare, working with local providers, providing backup emergency care for employees. I think there are a lot of ways that employers can help in this area, but also, of course, our policymakers. So, one of the things that we're working on this year is just hearing from our providers, from our community members, and get a better understanding of what the struggles are and what those possible policy solutions can be for the St. Louis region. So we're taking a closer look at that as well. But again, yeah, I think working with our employers and elevating this conversation has become really crucial. And I think the pandemic, there's a lot of struggle, a lot of challenges that it's provided, but it's also a lot of opportunity moving forward, because these conversations are really at the forefront right now. So we're excited to continue that conversation and work with employers in that way to see what they can do for working families right now.
Wendy, I want to ask you about United We. What are some things that you all are doing on the policy end? I know that you all are taking steps toward helping women succeed in that end. Tell me a little bit more about what you all have going on.
So United we're really at this time continuing to invest, as we always have, in some research and really making sure that we are informed. As Carrie said, it's important to have the data, the facts, as we are thinking about what policy strategy looks like. So we've invested in a COVID-19 data dashboard that looked at the impact to Missouri women of the pandemic, and have shared that information with policymakers. So that's one step. And really what that data really showed is the frontline healthcare workers, as we obviously know, really impacting women, as women are really strong in the healthcare industry, but also our service sector industry employees on the front line really impacted women during COVID-19. So at this moment in time, we're really starting to think about and talk with policymakers about COVID-19 recovery and what that looks like for Missouri. It's not a one size fits all, as Carrie and Leslie both pointed out. It's a childcare is really at the core. Great to see that Missouri Now has created a childhood department to really put some emphasis and spotlight on, we do have a challenge here in Missouri. 41% of the childcare facilities in Missouri are not accredited in 41% of the counties. So we have some counties that may only have one accredited childcare facility. And so accessibility and quality childcare is really important. And as Carrie stated, is a workforce development strategy for the state to attract new corporations to come to Missouri, as well as talent, and particularly, as Carrie cited the millennial generation for a retention strategy. So we're definitely paying attention to childcare. Again, it's going to be a long game for Missouri. It's not, a one size fits all, but really just gathering the data and being informed and being able to educate policymakers is a great step forward for the state. The other area we're really focused on is in the occupational licensing space. And we know that women hold a professional license at 2/3 of a greater rate than men do in Missouri. So that means what a professional license for any profession, an architect to an attorney to a healthcare professional requires you to have a certification in Missouri. And so looking at reducing barriers and red tape. So if someone wants to relocate and come to Missouri, they can start practicing immediately their work without having to, additional expense from, continuing education or a waiting period to be able to get certified in the state. So that's another area that we're specifically focused on right now, that we see that can reduce red tape as a step forward in COVID recovery.
Okay, Leslie, I want to switch over to you for a second. I know that women are resilient and we always find a way to bounce back no matter what. So talk to me a little bit about the status of Missouri women before the pandemic and where we are now.
Yeah, so I would say, pre-pandemic, for women, we were always bearing the burden of everyone else. So whether you're caring or parenting children or as part of the sandwich generation where you're doing children and parents, women often do it all while working and taking care of family. And so I would say that, what the pandemic has taught us is that a lot of career opportunities, particularly in the service industry, those jobs have gone away. And now post-pandemic, we really have to look at what career pathways will exist in the next 5 to 10 years that won't be automated and won't be obsolete. And so really Rung's role is to help women reskill and retool so that they are ready for the new economy post-COVID. I would say that, yes, the pre and post pandemic, women are still bearing the burden of everyone else. So it's been exacerbated by COVID because, many women are out of work. They're trying to figure out how to balance school at home and, maybe other responsibilities, thinking of new career pathways during this pandemic. So if you've lost a job and now you're getting into like maybe gig economy through Shipt or Instacart or some of those opportunities that we've seen an uptick in growth in those gig economies or gig opportunities, but trying to figure out how you replace that income has become more burdensome, I think, during pandemic, and obviously will continue to be an issue over the next 10 years. And so, we're just excited to be, partnering with Carrie and the Women's Foundation to really think about what the future holds for women, how we continue to be resilient, but also find a little time to invest in self so that, that recovery isn't as difficult. So you can be surrounded by a community of women who are rooting for you and showing you new and different ways to think about resiliency. So I would say, those are really kind of the key aspects that, looking forward, women are not changing. We are still, the same group of people who have, weathered yet another storm and yet another set of circumstances, and we're just so much better for it.
Yeah, that's was well said. And we know over the past year, we've seen women basically become the face of activism and really out there talking about women issues and policymaking. Wendy, what are some ways that women can get involved with advocacy work?
I think first and foremost, just being informed on the issues. I mean, that's one thing that everyone can do immediately. And secondly, we really saw great voter turnout in the general election. And I think always showing up to cast your ballot and use your voice to vote is really important. And as women, we are seeing more women who are actually running for elected office. And that's, it's not for everyone, but women supporting women in that capacity is another great way to get involved in the advocacy policy making space. For us as an organization, United We really looked at, what are some key barriers holding women back for this type of engagement work? And we really know that women have lack of confidence when it comes to this, to policy making, and know that women typically want to be asked to serve or to run for elected office. And we created an initiative called the Appointments Project and partnered with the Women's Foundation in St. Louis to host a training. And it is really to educate women about that they can start giving back in a capacity of serving on a board or a commission at the city, county, or state level. And this really, we hope this engagement may lead women to want to actually go on and run for elected office in the future. But if not, it's really important that we have women's voices at the table, really reflecting the population and what we look like in order to make the best decisions for the city, for the county, the state, and to have a unique perspective brought to the table. So the Appointments Project really is just encouraging women to think about another way of giving back and really stepping up and using their voice.
Andrea, can I add? Today is actually election day in the city of St. Louis. So I did have a chance to vote this morning and, was just really grateful to see 2 women candidates on the ballot. Actually 3. So Darlene Green, Tashara Jones, and Kara Spencer. So I think, this is evidence that, now is the time for women as elected officials, as advocates, as activists, and I'm just grateful to see that today in March, Women's History Month, we had 3 women on the ballot.
Yes, that's amazing. And then we also have Cori Bush doing what she is doing for the state of Missouri as well as for the city of St. Louis. Carrie, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo a lot of what Wendy said about being informed. I think that's an incredible first step to getting involved in any sort of advocacy work, whether that's, again, advocating, within your employer or advocating for local and statewide policy. And also a plug for, of course, the city mayoral race, the primary today. The Women's Foundation did ask the candidates issues specific that are important to women right now, everything from childcare to paid leave to leadership. And so those we posted again today as people are heading into, to vote this morning and today. We, again, it's about being informed about those candidates. And then, in terms of other areas that, we like to educate our networks and supporters on, next week, the Women's Foundation is hosting a webinar on March 8th, International Women's Day, on the potential policy solutions to an issue what's oftenly referred to as period poverty. And so that's when, women struggle to be able to provide the adequate supplies of period products, right? So whether they're having to decide between purchasing their supplies one month or putting food on the table. And this was an issue that we highlighted back in 2019, right? It's about educating and informing the public because a lot of people were unaware that this was a struggle that, quite honestly, a lot of women in St. Louis face. And so this is a follow-up to that discussion because right now in Jeff City, we have several pieces of legislation that aim to address this issue, including bills that hope to reduce the tax rate on period products and diapers to that of food, instead of a luxury item that we see here in the state of Missouri. And also a bill that aims to provide supplies in schools. So again, I think, it's just about being informed. Many people might not even be aware that these are the sort of bills that have been introduced in Jeff City. And so, taking that first step to get informed and then following up and talking with your representatives, letting them know that this is an issue you care about. Those are the sort of things that we're hoping to do and raise awareness on this issue.
Right. Those are some great suggestions as well. I just want to take a break and remind everyone to write us some questions so we can answer those during our Q&A session. And I'll try to get in a few more questions before we have to end our call. But I know that women are dealing with a lot right now, and depression is high on the list. How are you all caring for your own mental health during this time? And I'll ask you, Leslie, first.
Yeah, it is actually a priority for me. It's a priority for me as a leader of a women's organization. We talk about work-life harmony. It is not work-life balance. And so, there are going to be times when you spend more time at work, and there are going to be times where you have to be home. And so, we want to try to remove this guilt culture from our workplace so that women who need to make those choices have the freedom to do them. I also am really have gotten, primarily because of the pandemic, have really gotten into yoga. And so we provide a number of yoga classes here on site at Rung for Women. One is actually open to the public every Wednesday evening at 4:30 p.m., free yoga. And so the collective STL has become one of my favorite organizations. It's a Black-owned yoga studio in Old North. They're one of our co-design agencies here at Rung. And so yoga has become kind of a priority area for me. We have a garden on site, so a lot of people like to dig in dirt for self-care. It's not my thing, but I certainly like the fruits of that labor and fresh fruits and vegetables. And now that the weather is getting better, just getting outside. I just, if you do nothing other than take 10 minutes to invest in self and get some vitamin D, get outside, get some fresh air, it just really helps overall with your mental well-being. And for those who need it, I certainly am an advocate for counseling and therapy. So there are a number of free resources available for therapy. And then again, of course, Rung for Women has the great benefit of having both Provident and Safe Connections here on site, providing counseling and therapy. So yoga, exercise, quality food, sunshine are the things that I are my go-to.
Those are some good go-tos. I love yoga myself as well. Wendy, what about
Leslie, I love what you said. I want to hang out with you. Oh, it's a great question and an important question as well. And I have found, just being glued to Zoom as most are in, working remotely has been a challenge to, really being intentional of putting some time on the calendar to get up and walk away from the computer and to try to clear my mind has just been, it's having to be intentional about it. But like Leslie, really have enjoyed the 4 seasons more than ever before, of really spending some quality time outside. And that's been extremely helpful for, clearing the mind and taking care of, mental health capacity. But also I've started each morning by sending an email to someone that I hadn't connected with, or just, to start my day with something positive, sending out to someone else. I started this during the pandemic, and it's been so great to reconnect with, colleagues or friends that I hadn't talked to in a while, but just being intentional, just a couple of lines. And that's been a great way to start the day. So getting outside, getting up, walking away from the computer, and starting the day with, a positive email is how I've been focusing and taking care of myself.
I like that idea. I can probably add that to mine. I know my friends will like that. Carrie, how are you taking care of yourself?
First of all, thank you so much for asking this question. I think it's incredibly important right now. During our latest scorecard survey, we included a section on COVID, and we specifically asked how employers are supporting employees with mental health services, because we know that this has been such a challenging time. I will 3rd, I think everyone mentioned being outside more. So, you know, this past year, my family and I, we've tried to discover as many state parks as possible, and we've discovered some pretty cool ones. There's a lot to offer just in our state of Missouri. So get out there, check out your state parks. But yeah, I'm also, you know, I'm a very aesthetic person. So I like to surround myself with as much joy and happiness as possible, even if I'm working remotely in my house. So you'll see my kids' art right there, some pictures right there, and a special shout out to, I've got a candle going. Candles soothe me. This is Terra Candles, a locally women-owned business. So again, special shout out to our local women-owned businesses. Go support them. So yeah, just trying to surround myself with as much joy, because we're missing out on a lot of the things that we found so much joy in. So whether that's going to the ball game or going to the theater, you know, so much of that we're missing out on. So really trying to find those smaller moments that can bring you joy is so important right now. So yeah, those are a few little things that I'm doing.
I love it. So we have a few questions coming in from some viewers. They're good. We can start with you, Leslie. What do you think makes a workplace a positive environment for women?
Ooh, I bet Carrie has a great answer for that, but I would say, in my opinion, flexibility in the workspace, in the work scheduling, giving women and people in general some autonomy over their work and how they get it done. I think particularly now in the COVID age, flexibility, having workplace flexibility removes so much stress for people. Balance, harmony, I would say, is something that we really promote. And then I would say good quality benefits, and time off, and you know, honoring time off and encouraging time off, I think is another really important factor for leaders who run organizations to really promote, you know, people taking the time that they need to be better ambassadors for the organization and for their own individual productivity.
Sure. Carrie, you want to add anything? And then we'll go to you, Wendy.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely echo everything that Leslie said. I think, you know, having that flexibility, especially right now, is incredibly important. So resetting the norms around flexibility, especially during the pandemic, and, you know, hopefully a lot of that will stick around, right? So a lot of this balance that we've seen will continue on, and a lot of employers are learning that, hey, it's okay if, you know, they work various hours based on the needs of the family and so forth. I think making work sustainable right now is also really important. So employers kind of readjusting expectations and looking at projects, and, you know, life during COVID is very vastly different than pre-COVID. So I think taking a closer look at everything from performance reviews, projects, deadlines, and really adjusting and saying what is really sustainable during this time, so we don't lose more women right now. So we've seen literally millions of women leave the workforce because a lot of this is so unsustainable. And then how can employers support women once they do come back to the workforce? So what are some of those best hiring practices that can they look at, whether it's, you know, not asking about salary history, which can often, you know, put women in the lower salaries, right? Or you know, not, you know, having any sort of bias against any sort of gaps in employment. You know, we're going to see a lot of women have gaps in employment this year and potentially 2 years and whatnot. So I think, you know, having employers focus on those skills, focus on the experience, and not focus so much on that gap, I think is going to be really important as so many of these women re-enter the workforce. But yeah, I think providing support for families, whether it's, you know, through paid leave policies, flexible work schedules, having programs supporting women, you know, specific recruitment and advancement, you know, opportunities for women. Employee resource groups are another great way to support women. During this time, I was actually just speaking with another CEO who implemented an employee resource group during the pandemic because of these unique challenges that so many people are facing. So providing that community, again, to support women during this time.
to what Carrie and Leslie said as well is definitely the family-friendly workplace policies are critical. It really starts at the top with the CEO and really building that culture down. We know that the women who have dropped out of the workforce, a lot have been in the management track of the organization. There's concern through the corporate sector about what that track looks like post-COVID, now that women have dropped out and we were on this path to get women into the C-suite. So what does that look like post-COVID? I think we really need to pay attention to. The paid family and medical leave is a big priority for us as well as an organization, looking at not only the birth or adoption of a child, but for end of life as well. And we know that as the workforce ages, this is going to be a priority too. So really looking at beginning and end of life, and then just really creating, building on what Leslie and Carrie said about the flexibility is, post COVID, we've all become accustomed to, a different work environment. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward, but that flexibility is critical. The childcare continues to need to be a priority for employers to discuss, and getting really creative with some opportunities of what that looks like. Carrie cited whether it be a stipend, or some corporations have offered a grant as much as $2,000 per employee just to keep them in the workforce. I think is going to be a really critical conversation moving forward.
Okay. I'm trying to keep an eye on time, and we have lots of questions coming in, but I do want to ask this one. Talking about actionable items that women can do today, call to action. What can women do in our community to get involved in collective efforts to empower women? I know Leslie, Run for Women, has a call out for volunteers. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So yes, we are recruiting volunteers and would welcome, women and men, honestly, but welcome anyone who is interested in advancing our mission and helping women in our community elevate their lives. We have opportunities for gardening, to be a mentor, to do episodic volunteer events, or to either be a long-term volunteer. So yes, we are welcoming anyone who is interested in advancing our mission. You can register to be a volunteer on our website at rungforwomen.org. I know it's in the chat, but really, want St. Louis to come and support our mission.
Wendy, do you want to add anything to that?
Just add the opportunity for the Appointments Project. If you have an interest in using your voice in that capacity, please go to our website. You can sign up. We are doing virtual overview sessions of what that means and how to approach that work to volunteer for an appointment. And so we need you. I think that's the important point to make. We need women to have a seat at the policy and decision-making table and to utilize their voice. So really a call to action to engage with the Appointments Project is a key takeaway today as well. And then again, continuing to be educated and informed. And I think it was dropped in the chat box. We've got the Status of Women in Missouri research study, a pay equity best practice guidelines that could be shared with employers, paid family leave policy brief. Again, just that informing and educating yourself. And we have plenty of research available. So would love for women to be educated with data and facts.
Anything from you, Carrie, that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the Women's Foundation is a proud partner with Run for Women, so we're actively helping recruit for their social capital program. So finding those women and men in the community who want to give back to these women going through the program. It's all about building community, building a network, providing guidance and support to these women. So we're excited to recruit for that. There are other opportunities to get involved with our organization as well, of course, and you can visit our website and complete a volunteer interest form. But I think just getting out there and learning about the different ways. I mean, I know for nonprofits right now, this is a time of need in terms of getting volunteers and support, because it's been such a challenging year because that engagement, that personal level engagement hasn't been there. So I would say just get out there and see what other opportunities are there in the community in terms of getting involved in some of the nonprofits in your community. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
I'll try to squeeze in one more question. It's a good one. We have, and this could be for anyone. You can meditate on it, think about it for a second, and whoever wants to jump in can jump in. But we have one question that says, how do you see the role of women in curtailing the systemic racism that exists in our community?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Curtailing the systemic racism in our community. Yeah, I would say that, you know, we have to do our own work and be vigilant about culture and equity, and making sure that we think about others as much as we, you know, think about ourselves often. Curtailing the systemic racism, I would say, you know, as an employer, I am very intentional about our DEI practices and policies, and making sure that this is an inclusive environment for all of our staff. I would say as a mom, I have difficult conversations with my 9.5-year-old daughter right now. I don't hide things from her. I want her to be aware of what's happening in our community and environment in the world. And so I think, you know, having that level of self-awareness, it starts individually, but wherever your voice can influence and ensure, you know, right from wrong at all times, particularly as an employer, as a leader, as a parent. You know, I'm always advocating for what's right and for inclusive environments.
Wendy or Carrie, anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Leslie, you said it beautifully. I think creating that environment in the workspace where people feel comfortable to raise these sort of issues, and as employers and employees being open to those conversations, especially right now, is incredibly important. You know, we talk about this, you know, this unlearning that has to take place. And I think that's really, you know, that's something that's on each and every one of us, you know, to be aware of our own biases and so forth, and how that, you know, what we bring to the table and so forth. I think it's also, like Leslie said, it's incredibly important to talk to our children, right? And to have those difficult conversations, you know, things that maybe, you know, I didn't discuss when I was little, but now I feel like, you know, a lot of my peers, a lot of my friends, we are having these sort of conversations, even with our younger children. And so I think that's incredibly important. And then just looking internally as organizations, I know that there are a lot of, this is the time to look at policies and procedures and look at it through a D&I lens, looking at the intersection of equity and what that really looks like. I think this is an incredibly important time to raise that conversation and really respond to it, right? So when you're going through this process and learning about ways that you can improve, you know, opportunities for inclusion and diversity, really using that and making progress towards it, I think is incredibly important.
I would just add, I completely agree. It starts with the self. You know, we have to take responsibility. We have to be intentional. What I really would like to see in Missouri, just to build on everything Leslie and Carrie have already said, is I'd really like to see our policymakers look like Missouri. And if we look like Missouri, we're going to be talking about the issues that are impacting all of us. And that's not the case today. Missouri's never had a woman governor. We only have one woman right now in a statewide elected office. And we are not looking like the state. So if we're really going to address and really lean into systemic racism, we have to look different. And so great qualified people are joining us today. We encourage them to step up. We want to be supportive of you, and we want you there at the table.
Those are all great answers, and I appreciate those. But now we are going to send it back over to you, Emily. Thank you all for listening and watching the program today. And I hope you all took away some great information and will continue to empower women and other women as well in your lives.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you to all our panelists, Wendy Doyle and Leslie Gill and Carrie Kohler. We're so appreciative of you taking the time today to be with us and to share your insights and your perspectives. And thank you also just for all of the amazing work you're doing. It's really wonderful. And I love that I get the privilege in my work to sit and listen to all of you. So thank you for being part of our day. Thanks, of course, to everyone who tuned in today. And thank you to all of our Beyond the Ballot sponsors. You can see them here, our presenting sponsor, Wells Fargo in particular, and our education sponsor, Emerson. I'm gonna share one more slide with you. You can see on the screen a few of our upcoming Women's History Month programs. Again, you can visit mohistory.org or our Missouri History Museum Facebook page to see the full lineup of those programs. And don't forget to look for the recorded versions on the Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel. And don't forget to take the survey that should have popped up by now in your browser. We really want to get your feedback and hear what you thought about the program. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks again to everyone for being a part of our morning and this program. Sincerely appreciate it. Hope you all have a wonderful week.